On this Roll for Crit review, we're taking a look at a cooperative deduction game from Idventure. It's called Detective Stories Fire in Adlerstein. It takes place in the German town of Adlerstein, and you have been assigned the task of solving a murder mystery, clearing someone else who has been wrongfully accused, or so they claim. It's up to you to solve a series of puzzles, mysteries, look through evidence, and figure out what really happened.
When you open the box in this, you have access to everything. There's no solving certain puzzles to unlock other things or trying to talk to different people. You have pretty much all the evidence you will need. And they come with a lot of really interesting ones. I mean, we have photos here, medical receipt for medicine, a fake little matchbook, even a crumpled up piece of paper. Really curious how they pack that, as well as other stuff. The other big thing is you can look up anything online or use any other website whenever you want. And I mean real websites. This isn't like Detective Modern Crime board game when you need a certain symbol to be allowed to look up something on Wikipedia. If you want to look it up, you can. In fact, this case lets you use certain popular social sites you actually have to look up for information.
Yeah, it actually says in the back of the box, a Facebook account is required to play this game, which is very interesting. So it's really open-ended and immersive in that way. Like we said, it's not like an unlock game where you need to find certain cards to progress. You can set this up, sit around a table if you're playing with multiple players, hand some things out, like, here, you take this newspaper, look through this, you want to look through this case file, there's evidence, and just go to town. And I think that's, there's no rules to this game. That's what's really, to me, makes it stand out, is immediately it's just sit down, look at this stuff, and solve the mystery. So I think that makes it really accessible, like a really good option for people who aren't gamers, as a lot of these games tend to be, but there's zero setup time, you know what I mean? There's nothing, you're playing.
I mean, I think you hit the nail sort of on the head for me too, is that you just sort of open the box. It's not like, read this page first. Don't open this until you're instructed to. You're like, here's everything, here's the evidence. And I mean, this does, because it is a mystery, you're solving a crime. My first minds are gonna go, like I said, Detective Modern Crime board game, Sherlock Holmes. And in both of those, you really are slowly gathering the evidence. You don't really know much. In this, you could accidentally just take the shortest path.
Right, yeah, you could potentially find the incriminating piece of evidence right away. The trick of this one is it's sort of like, not really a logic puzzle, but in some sense, where you're kind of trying to eliminate suspects and say, well, who had an alibi
in
and
this
when?
Case.
Yeah, in this particular case, of course. And so that is one reason that you will want to go through everything, just to be safe, like, oh, this person could have done it, this person could have done it. Eventually, there is a website where you'll be inputting who you believe is the actual suspect, the person you want to accuse of doing it. They'll tell you if you're right or wrong and then explain everything. But other than that, and like we said, some things may ask you to go online. Most of it is just the physical detective work looking through things.
That being said, there is a bit of, this is not just fully like those detective games I mentioned before. It's almost like a hybrid with those exit escape room games, because some of the puzzles, like there's one in here that involved a medication, and it really isn't the way that a doctor would describe it. It was obviously designed to be like, you need to solve.
Puzzle.
Yeah, it's a puzzle.
Right. But I will say, even with the little things like that, compared to a lot of these other games, I feel like this one feels very immersive and in some ways very more realistic. Again, because in those other games, it's very obvious that you're playing a game, right? I'm always thinking about mechanics, like, oh, I can combine this card with this card, I can spend this token to do that. In this, that's not a thing, you know what I mean? It really is, oh, what does the newspaper say? How does it compare to your records of the travel agency or whatever it is? And I think that's a pretty cool, unique take on it. I thought that the puzzles were, for the most part, overall story, it's not, I don't think it was super challenging, but it was pretty decent. It was enough to keep my interest. And the story itself, again, like also not anything super memorable in my opinion. It's not like the greatest mystery I've ever encountered, but it was enough. I thought it was good for what it is. For a 90-minute to 2-hour game, I was pretty satisfied with what I got in here.
For me, when I think of, you compared it to the other stories, when you think of mechanics, I don't think mechanics as much as for that you're sort of going through a story. You're learning about the characters, you're finding out what happened, and that's why, because you're sort of gathering a little bit more. When this feels like it's not as much about the story as much as building the actual case. I felt more like this is the more I guess it's realistic, but in a sense like what you'd give to the lawyers, like
Right.
to Law and Order, you know.
Right. Usually, you'd also talk to them. You're a little more in the dark in this one, but that's part of the game.
So you do have a variety of clues, which may give a lot of information, maybe very little, and a lot of, very realistic information. But in the end, it is a bunch of fun little puzzles for you to solve to try to find out who is the true culprit.
Now our crits and misses for detective stories, Fire in Adlerstein. Crits. All of the evidence is presented to you right at the start of the game. There's no need for story progression or unlocking new pieces of information. It can make it feel, in some ways, a lot more immersive and realistic.
Because you're given everything at the beginning, that means all puzzles and mysteries are available, making it easier for everyone to have something to try and solve.
The form that the evidence takes is unique and interesting to handle. It's not simply cards or a piece of text telling you something. It's actual physical, tactile things that you can look at and get an understanding of.
Many detective games tell you about the evidence, but this one gives it to you in physical form.
There is no rule book in this box. There are no mechanics to get bogged down by. You can open it up, and if you're with a group of seasoned gamers or people who are brand new to this world, everybody can right away start trying to solve the mystery.
Misses. You are given everything at once, which means there's a lot of information for you to look over. It can be a bit overtaxing, and you might not know where to start.
Depending on your player count, there might be a lot of information that could overwhelm you when you first start before you finally get into organizing everything.
Most detective games have you really be part of the story, interacting with characters to gather evidence. In this, you simply are just given it all, which means there isn't as much depth to the characters and to the story. It's really about just solving all the puzzles. I want to delve a bit into that last crit. We always like to do this, but because actually I think some people, like I included, actually looked at the price of this and compared it at first to Sherlock and Modern Detective. I'm like, this is about half the price, at least the Sherlock on Amazon stuff, but the other one comes with like a lot more cases. When you compare this more to like an escape room and exit, it's about the same price, and then it's more of a detective theme on top, a lot more puzzles, and that I think is how you should compare this.
Yeah, it's a one-time play. You're going to do this once and be done with it. You don't have to destroy or alter any of the components, so you could give it to someone else for them to try or resell it, what have you. But yeah, I think that for the price, if you get enough people together, it's like going to an escape room. I think that it's, especially with truly the quality of the components, they are like pretty neat. There's some actual
It's a lot of
stuff
fun
here.
to actually get photos and things like that. It's just, I remember thinking like, when you go through a case and if you played a lot of the Sherlock, you're like, oh, I want to experience that story and interact. You might not get that too much. But when I thought of it like, oh, these puzzles to solve and this information and like, then it's like, oh, this actually is probably a worthy challenger compared to all the very flooded area now of escape room games that exist.
Yeah. And I do think also what you said before about having a lot of stuff, I think this is a good one for a slightly larger group. I think it officially goes up to 4 or 5 on the box.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when we play Sherlock, we usually like maybe 3.
Right.
I mean, that's us too. We don't want to share.
I think that it could be really fun, with a larger group, because you can, like I said, you just pass these out. Like you look at the newspaper, and then later you kind of come together and say, oh, what did you find in there? Oh, that links to this. There's some cool collaborative stuff that isn't always as easy to find in some of these other games. This certainly didn't blow me away. I don't think this is like the best escape room game I've ever played, but the puzzles were decent, the story was interesting, and it's really the components and the style of it, the presentation, that I think elevates it to make it worth taking a look at.
Thematically, I mean, I like the detective thing, but taking it as an escape room was really fun, especially when you get real fun little props like this. The fact you can look up anything on your phone, you don't feel like, oh, this would be so much easier, I can just Wikipedia. You don't have that kind of feeling. Even though we looked up some stuff that is still challenging, like I don't want to give too much away of some puzzle solving, a certain key, so to speak.
There's some codes in there you got to decipher.
And that was really cool when we actually pulled it out and deciphered it, like, oh, that leads to this, and it goes to this, and all of a sudden you start connecting everything. So if you like detective theme, but you do also want something more of an escape room and less of the actual novelization of detective stories, this is definitely something to look at. If you're just looking for I want to read a Sherlock Holmes story, probably then stick to like Sherlock Holmes or Modern Detective. But this does, I think, do the escape room style solving mystery very well.
Yeah, if you want to check it out for yourself, we'll put a link to where you can buy it right now in the description, or you can let us know if you've made it through. How'd you feel about the puzzles in this one, or have you tried any of the other ones in the series? Because I believe there's a couple more and probably more to come in the future. We'll see. Talk to us in that comment section right down below. Until next time, gumshoes. I don't know, I tried. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
That's has been Roll for Crit.
If you love board game content, do us a favor, like and subscribe, and support us on Patreon.
Keep watching our content to guarantee you'll top deck a good video.